Alright, so today we hopefully go over the remaining issues we have. Is there any value on like looking at the milestone, or should we just? Oh, we should do 2-1 first, right? Then we can expand from there on. So which one? You said this one is the fast one?
Yes. So we reviewed it last week, and then I'm just bringing it back with the tweaks that came. So
your comments are at the bottom.
Yeah, I put it at the bottom. Yeah. Mainly because I was going to send it to Christoph to Carol with, didn't we approve this? So now it's fixed times equals of left and right. We stuck with the name zero memory because that seems to be the most apt. So the parameter name is span because we don't really have a better name. And then moved the crypto operations fill random to random number generator fill. And then I named the parameter data because that's what get bytes names it. So
do we have a fill today that takes an array or something today? I'm just can't remember.
We have get data.
This is
get
actually
bytes.
a new API.
I know the span one is, but I wasn't sure if we had an overload that was already something.
No, there are instance members that will fill the array with random data, but the point of this API is such that you don't have to actually create an instance of it. You just call the static API for convenience, and it just fills a array.
So it will be a thread safe random number generator fill. It turns out in core all of our random number generators are thread safe. In framework they're not.
What does thread safe in that context mean? Like
you can call it like it's a static member, therefore we guarantee thread safety of being called from multiple threads.
It's not going to like corrupt.
Oh, because the parent ones are all instance methods essentially.
Yeah. And in core we currently only have the instance methods, but it turns out that all of the instances that random number generator.create will give you are actually thread safe due to their implementation.
The problem is like you can't really rely on an implementation detail in a production application.
Oh my dear.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
One should.
Yeah. Will that fill actually do any allocations? Like it looks like all the base types are on calling get bytes, so you basically have to allocate a byte array, pass it down, or whatever.
No, this should be.
This is allocation free. We just pass the pointer into the underlying. So Windows CAPI did not have a static fill. You had to allocate a provider and ask them to fill it. CNG does, and that's what we use. And then OpenSSL and Security.framework are both static fills. So we just essentially you give us a pointer, we pass it to the underlying implementation and say fill this with garbage, and then move on with life.
So you're not using public APIs to
Correct.
implement this then? Okay. All right.
Eric, can you by the way?
Framework might have to do something different because somebody can intersect our directory.
Perfect.
But that's a problem for when span goes forward.
We'll get to it.
Right, so then, I don't know, like, the API looks good to me.
Yeah, I would just update the top comment with this updated so that we know what we're actually getting.
Sure.
Look at if we go back and review this again.
Okay. Yeah. That's fine. Cool. And then
So I assume the span guys looked at that as well, right? Because I'm more.
yeah, this was just
Christoph was here last week.
Last week.
When we reviewed it.
So I noticed today while looking at something in RSA that at least one of the places, like we have where we made span overloads of stuff on the RSA class, like the try sign hash calls the input span source, so I'm probably going to make a PR before we ship to rename that to hash to match the other overload. So just some cleanups. I'll probably just bounce them off email, and if anybody reads it,
Are you trying to get free API roots right now?
no, I'm just letting you know it's coming.
That's why we brought cookies.
Yeah. Just letting you know it's coming.
Cookies don't work for me.
You're
Beer
right.
would.
Strudel?
It's a bit early for beer.
I could run out and get beer. This is number 2.
Eric has a keg in his office.
He's a kegerator. I don't care.
Fair enough.
It's a cool keg. Alright, so. This is fun for Eric, but Eric left the team, so like, should we just
This is Levi's. No, this is Levi's baby.
Oh, I see. I see.
Scroll all the way down.
I see. So this is the one where, do we have quorum in the room to like make a decision here, or should we just defer this to
The only one that was pushing back, I think, was Jan, right? That's the
Yeah,
one.
and I had an email thread with him where we came to an agreement.
Do we need this for 2.1? I mean,
No
like,
one's asking for it for 2.1, but it was previously approved.
I think it's one of those things, if we can close on it, and
Yeah.
it's in. If we don't, then it doesn't. Like, so.
So I made some changes from the previous review, and basically I wanted to run those changes by this committee to get your feedback on them. We can go over them at a high level. So actually, you know what might be easier is to open up two tabs side by side, and to have one at the original approved API, and to have one at this.
Which one is the original one?
It's at the very top.
Okay, so yeah. Windows.
So I'll go over in no particular order the changes that I made. So first is, you'll notice that the approved proposal had a try open and an unload method. Right? Like, it seems for naming symmetry to make load and unload.
But
So I.
did you just talk about the new camera?
Yes, we've tried the video.
Sorry guys online, like that's what happens. Just got a new camera and just spill coffee on it.
It was just on the lock.
Just on the connector, it's fine.
Like, what could possibly go wrong with that?
So that's one. So the second change is, you'll notice in the approved proposal we had a bunch of try methods. These methods don't throw; they just return true or false, and then they out either a native library or an endpointer or a delegate.
Right.
Well, if you can't open a native library, why not just return null? If you can't get a symbol, why not return endpointer.0, and why not return null for the delegate? Like, it seems weird to have try have both an out parameter and return a boolean when the failure return value is well known. It's not like dictionary try get value. It's not like int try parse.
Why isn't the T on try get delegate constraint?
It is in the new proposal.
Okay.
It was an oversight in the original.
Because with the constraint, I agree that null means
Yeah.
it didn't work.
So one of the, I forgot exactly what we said last time when we talked about this. I mean, one of the reasons why we said maybe we should make them try APIs is more about the, do you, and that's the thing where Christoph and I kind of disagree. Like, it's the, do you want to communicate that error can occur? Like is null an expected behavior, or like would you just like the null reference afterwards, right? I mean, like
You would immediately null ref if you try to use this.
So we sometimes use try APIs now in other areas of the framework to communicate, this may not work, so you have to be able to prepare to write the else. But in some cases, it's like you look at the API and it seems like, we'll always return a valid value, when in fact it cannot always give you a valid value. Like in a dictionary, when you index with a key, you kind of know that the key may not be present, right? It's somewhat of an intuitive understanding. So I guess you could make the same case here, that you ask for a simple address, well, it may not be there, right?
What are some other cases in the framework where we have try patterns, where...
Null is not a valid value, or when null is a valid value of the try, but we still have
but that doesn't apply here, though. I mentioned int, try, parse, and dictionary, try, get value. Neither of those patterns is out.
Yeah, so like for int, it was mostly because it was similar to the dictionary case where, they couldn't represent, when they designed the API, there was no representation for like a nullable, right? So they basically just went with the exception, and then they said, okay, now we want no one to throw, so we give a new API for that. There's other APIs we added for casting APIs for mutable, where we basically said, Was it like something like try get underlying array or something? Like there under certain circumstances you can get an array, but not in all circumstances or something like that. And then you don't get the array because it wasn't baked by an array.
So we have like implicit. We have like implicit understanding like all try doesn't show by default.
That's not true at all.
No, I mean like without like parameter validation or something like this, it shouldn't show.
That's not true at all.
Like
these actually can
like
run
what?
certain
Like
cases.
Try. So the try pattern design is it returns false for one specific category of problem and throws for all other problems. In the case of
outside the conditions that you cannot control. I mean, I'm talking about the functionality of
right.
try.
So
usually we say like we provide try, so it's not like the other one which is control.
So try only covers the common case of a method.
Yeah.
Like that's if Christoph was here, he would be very much ranting right now since he's the one who wrote the rules.
So if we actually have this pattern in other places in the framework, then I'm willing to let it slide. I thought that this was a one-off thing in the sense that we had a try and known failure values, and that was just giving me a little bit of grief.
Yeah, I mean, so the Windows function that this will be calling eventually is getProc address, which is not an H result returning thing. It just returns the pointer or the null pointer if it didn't find it.
Yeah.
And it returns null, and you call get last there to find out what the actual problem is.
I don't.
That's what load library documentation says.
I don't know if
getProc address says GLE is found.
What does that even mean? Okay, whatever.
I mean,
so is there any cases where this is going to be null where it doesn't throw when you're load now? It's going to return null but not throw.
Sorry, what you mean?
There's going to be. It seems like you're going to have to convey the why it failed.
I'm not changing the throw versus not throw behavior in the new proposal. Like if in the approved proposal, if it would have thrown then, it will still throw.
No, I guess my question is there any case where you would actually not throw but return null? I guess is what I was really trying to.
For instance, if the DLL you're trying to open isn't found.
Why wouldn't that throw?
Right. This is why we said try is.
Well, I mean, like, to be fair, like, when we reviewed API last week, like, there wasn't a parameter that would control whether it throws or not. It was like throw an error.
Yeah, it was similar to the reflection APIs.
And so we just said we don't do that. So like if you, especially when you don't want to throw most of the time, that's why we should change it to try.
Okay, well let's.
So it's a new one. Like if you just say, we don't need the parameter because we just return null. Like it's logically the same thing as the try APIs, right? So I'm like if null is a valid value and like it's indicative of like you can't do it, which I think for try open or like open or load, it makes sense that if the DLL cannot be found, or the file is found but it's not a valid PE file, you just return null. It seems sensible. But I mean, the question is that always the case? If that
do we
is
want?
True, then
There are cases
I
where
couldn't
this
load
will
this
throw rather than return false.
like
For example, if you're trying to load a DLL with the wrong architecture, this will throw rather than return false.
And I would expect if you try loading a text file, it would throw.
Yeah.
So not a PE is an invalid input, not a not a common scenario.
We are going to differentiate between the wrong cases and
Documentation.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that we don't do the same thing consistently. I'm looking at the documentation for assembly.load. It never returns null. It always throws if there's any error cases.
Right. Yeah.
But load library turns null. And you have to call
so let's move it back to the try pattern then,
Yeah.
because it sounds like that conveys this could return null, and there are some cases where it will throw and some where it will return false, and we'll just document what the different cases are.
I think it's totally good enough start. I mean, like it still seems. I don't know, like it seems like this is also a light up pattern, right? Where it's kind of inconvenient that we do throw it all because probably you don't want to throw it. You just want to say, okay, wrong architecture, you can't load it, fine.
Right, and honestly, the reason that we were looking at that particular pattern in the first place is that it's just messy for a call site to have to deal with.
Yeah,
But you're not going to be using this all that often, so.
It's true, although like with the new inline vars, it's not too bad. You can just say out var result, right? Which is
That's fair. That's fair.
which is kind of almost as convenient.
Okay.
But yeah.
let's move on then.
Well, we still want to, I guess, address your load versus open question, because do you want to call it try load then at that point?
Yeah. I think we had already agreed on that.
Yeah, I think that it should be load. I don't know why we called it open here.
Yeah, so scroll all the way down and you can see the new proposal.
I'm just reading the notes from last time to make sure we have them addressed. But
I don't remember seeing here.
We moved the iDisposable, we did the throw an arrow thing, and then the search directory thing. Okay, that makes sense. And then new proposal is...
So yeah, I had renamed it to load in the new proposal, again, just for the symmetry.
Yeah.
The other change is I have an overload of load, which takes an assembly as a parameter. The reason being that if you pass the calling assembly into that parameter, then we can start taking advantage of things like the assembly load context and the default DLL import search paths. Those are behaviors that DLL import would have given you automatically.
I see.
Will people ever know when they need to use that, when not?
You should almost always pass it in.
Then why do we have the other one then?
Well,
Sometimes it doesn't.
if you're passing default, you need it.
Yeah.
And if you're calling the other one, maybe I don't know if the other one should just throw if you give default or...
What it basically comes down to is if you're trying to load a DLL that's well known to the system, like on Windows something in the System.32 directory, it doesn't really matter what the assembly is because it's like a global DLL. If you're trying to load something that's shipped as part of your NuGet package, maybe an unmanaged dependency that you have, then you should pass in the assembly so that we can do the proper resolution. For example, we need to know, because we locate your dependent DLLs in the same directory as the assembly, we need to be able to go back, figure out where you were located so that we can query all of the appropriate paths. Stuff like that.
So is the one that doesn't take an assembly going to throw if you give default? Or sorry, legacy, whatever the zero value is?
It could if you wanted to. I didn't plan on having it throw.
Well, because legacy has the using the current caller context, etc. So if we say give me an assembly if you want legacy, or tell me which path that didn't involve the assembly, and then we're good to go. Which might mean that anything that would need the assembly would need to throw if it's a.
Okay, that's a good point. So yeah, we would need to do extra parameter validation on that then.
If they don't pass the assembly, are we going to just take the current executing assembly notion or something?
The current executing assembly is proven to be too unreliable historically.
So we're just basically going to not take any caller. We're just going to do it based on a root.
Yeah. If you don't pass an assembly, then we do it either. I believe the logic is check the exe first because there's only one exe for the process, and then fall back to global paths unless you've overridden it through a search paths. Alternatively, if you pass the assembly, then we can start doing more granular checks.
I was about to say, the first one you could almost default the caller to say, the
EXE.
Yeah, the entry point for the app, right, which is well defined.
Yeah, EXE sounds wrong. The precedence would be wrong there because that's
the entry point groups.
What entry point? When you say entry point, what API are you talking about?
Isn't there something off of
assembly
domain
get main
context?
Well, there's assembly get entry point assembly.
Yes. No, but I don't know which assembly to query.
That's a static API.
Static API.
Assembly dot where did main come from?
I've been spending some time recently running into issues where, looking at libraries, bringing over to core, and then seeing that they did the wrong thing to try and locate the application. So you have to be very intentional. Get module file name null is bad because it's going to give you the wrong. It'll point at the host.
Yeah.
And so we need to be very intentional about the way you locate the path.
Yeah. Can we make a note to call that particular API assembly?
So basically what we just said, I think, is so there's two overloads. Right? So if you call the second one, you take whatever the guy called.
Is there a reason to have two? Why not one with just also another default parameter for assembly?
How does that work with out parameters? Is it required parameters first, then the out parameter, then optional parameters after that?
Yes.
Oh, this is going to now have an out parameter, right?
Yeah. If we turn it back into try, yeah.
Also, this means that DLL import search paths can no longer be an optional parameter if you didn't specify the assembly. You absolutely have to do one or the other.
I see.
or both.
Okay.
Well, you can also specify the argument name, right? You can call the second one without specifying the caller.
I mean, you could make it say if they're both null, throw of like, give me one or the other, buddy. But then it's a runtime failure.
Okay, that works.
Yeah.
It seems strange though that if you just called the API, passing only the required parameters, now it throws an exception at runtime.
That's actually a very good point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's fine to indicate that you have to give one of the two.
Okay. So another change is handle got renamed to raw handle. I don't really feel strongly about that. The reason for that is we might actually expose an honest-to-God handle type in the future, and I would like to reserve the property name handle for that handle type.
So what would you return then?
Well, it would be some type of directory safe handle.
And you usually use raw handle for the other one?
No, so we don't actually have a pattern for this as far as I can tell. The closest thing we've had is file string, which used to return an int pointer to its handle property, but I know everyone agrees that that was a bad idea.
We have a couple examples of this that maybe not in core, but I think socket, pipe is a file handle. We tried to eradicate it in core initially because we thought it was a bad pattern.
We wanted to expose safe handles. Yeah.
We could call it base address instead of raw handle.
Is it the base address?
On Windows it is. I think it is on non-Windows as well, but I don't know that for a fact.
If we can't guarantee it, we shouldn't call it that in case people start doing stupid things with
The
it.
handle for module is its base address.
It is on Windows.
Yeah, and on socket we have handle and safe handle.
Yeah, chain has this, or X509 chain has a safe handle property. It does not have a handle property.
So then, I mean, if we have that on processes, we have handle, which is in PDR.
Okay,
We have safe handle,
let's
that
leave
is
this handle
safe
up.
handle.
We'll leave this handle. Why by me?
Because, I mean, it doesn't really matter. If you expose one before the other, you always have a deprecation problem anyway. So, like, whether you reserve the better name for later, I don't think it matters much.
So we're getting to the last two changes then. The other one is get delegate. I added a parameter, exact name, which controls name mangling. This is important for standard calls on x86 because they are decorated in the export table. And if you're just calling get proc address, you have to pass a decorated name. I can't imagine our callers will know how to properly decorate those function names, so we should do it for them.
This is W and A, or
it's not W and A. It's like the at like 4 or 8 or whatever, where that number is the size of all of the parameters on the stack. W and A we also check, but it's kind of different than standard decoration.
It's C++.
And then
so is this parallel to the?
It exactly mimics DLL imports exact name field.
So why do you not have the exact name argument on get symbol address?
Because get symbol address is like I want this thing as it existed in the export table. It might be a field rather than a function, or not a field, but it might be a global external declaration.
So in that case, maybe should we rename the argument then to just exact name to make clear that this is not, you will not mangle that name. You will just take it as a symbol.
But does that mean? But for get delegate and get symbol address are a little bit different here because get symbol address is like what I'm getting back to you might not actually be a function, whereas get delegate is no, this thing that's being exported is an honest-to-God function. You have specified the calling type or the calling convention inside the T-delegate and blah, blah, blah.
yeah, like naming get symbol address symbol name seems maybe fair because and then again in documentation we can say that this is no mangling will be applied. It will give the exact name you give.
So I think maybe not think unnecessary. What I'm thinking is something really, really like simple, like. Well,
again, what I'm trying to do is something similar to what DLL import would have done because that's kind of the heart of the underlying issue.
That's what I had. You just convey the same notion, right? Like it's like, yeah, you still say no, we just look it up, and it may not even be a function. Like that's
That works.
I'm trying to get is if I pass in foo here, I should be able to pass foo in here because it has the same name.
Oh,
They might give you different results.
DLL import actually calls it exact spelling.
Exact spelling.
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing, is exact spelling, when you were describing it, I thought you were talking about exact spelling, and we document that as dealing with the W&A.
It does more than that.
Okay. So it's just our documentation. Yeah, there's exact spelling, and then there's preserved sig.
Preserved sig we don't need because that's on the delegate itself. If the delegate has an unmanaged function pointer attribute, things like calling convention, preserved sig, and so forth are already on that attribute, so we don't have to worry about it.
So what should we call it then? Exact spelling then?
Use exact name should be use exact spelling, or just exact spelling. I believe the default field for DLL import attribute is false, and I'm just matching that.
That should be the case.
And then get symbol address. I would call it symbol name. Symbol name is probably best for Jerome's recommendation.
Yeah, that's fine. I think my key thing is just I would try to make these, if they're the same, it should be the same.
There's no reason to use both of these in conjunction. You would use one or the other. Right? Yeah.
So what would I use symbol address for?
Maybe you have a global read-only data that you want to access for some reason. Of course, that would be in the data segment.
You're really upset with people calling, or you're really upset with the marshalling cost of get last error, and you want to just grab the last error variable and do a marshal.read.
That would work. It is possible to export things in line functions. You can export global fields.
Yeah.
And maybe that global field contains some identifier that you need.
And were we restoring these to the try pattern? Like, I'm fine
It would
with
be
not.
restored to the try
I'm
pattern.
just asking. Because Emo is rewriting the proposal, so.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure we don't get instead.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's pretty straightforward, though.
So it would be try load.
And then they would out the native library immediately after the name.
There's currently no way to do get symbol address at all with the current DLL import models or anything.
Correct.
I'm just wondering whether or not we need to add that yet, if we don't have a clear reason to. It just seems like it's opening the doors for something we might not want.
I don't remember why it was in the original proposal.
You have to move it left one. Because the DLL import search path is default parameter.
I don't know. I would kind of lean towards not even having to get symbol address for this round until we actually have a concrete scenario for it. Just because it seems like it's adding undue risk for not any clear value yet.
So one thing that you could actually use it for is if you wanted to do if you wanted to code gen your own call I patterns inside of a dynamic method, you could use get symbol address to do that. And I know that graphics libraries do stuff like that under the covers. Granted, they don't use this API because it doesn't exist, but it might help in scenarios.
Yeah, I'm torn. I mean, on the one hand side, there's a risk of the adding an API, and then there's also a risk of not adding the API because once you need it, it takes another iteration of the platform to add the API. So it's opportunity lost if you don't add it now. So I don't know. Like the way I see this API is kind of advanced for people that really want to do load library get proc address, and get symbol address really is get proc address in the more wider sense. So, it seems like
Get proc address is just a misnamed API to begin with.
because basically that is get proc address.
It is get proc address. It's raw.
So they don't filter down to like symbols that are functional. Do they even know? No, they just look up their key and then determine whether the pointer that is.
Do we know that all the platforms that we care about support getting non-functions back from?
I looked at the DLSim documentation and it looks like it does support that. Because all it does is it just looks at the export table. The export table doesn't point to anything.
Yeah, just making sure that like if they've put safety nets around things and then we have this finds exported fields on Windows but not on Linux or Mac, then
it occurs to me that they intended for people to find more than just proc addresses, given the name DLSim.
Fair enough. So,
I can double check the documentation. That's just confirmed.
okay.
I mean, honestly, like this was unfortunate. There were arguments here. For some reason, you can't see the selection, but it's the second line here.
What do you want to be different?
Why do we have to make it optional?
DLL for search paths.
You can make it mandatory.
Make it mandatory and then tell people pass in something. Pass in 0.
Legacy.
Like, isn't it? So the other thing we talked about is like if I call the first one, you will use the assembly entry point for the same. Like basically, calling the second one with assembly entry point and some paths is the same as calling the first one with the same paths, right? Is it fair? Behavior-wise?
Have to think more through that, I guess.
Because if you do it like that, then maybe it's just one method.
It makes me nervous, though, that I'm imagining a scenario where a NuGet package developer calls the try-load API without passing in the assembly because he's just using like the default shortest overload, and then all of a sudden, like he's getting back either the wrong DLL or nothing. Whereas he would say, well, DLL import worked just fine. Why is this being called?
So you would be saying you should never fall back on assembly get entry assembly?
I think it would be surprising if the application were a single exe that were self-contained with no dependencies. It would make sense, given that we're moving to a world where everything's being encapsulated in a package and it carries its own dependencies. Like this makes me think we need to make it mandatory, unless you're looking for a global DLL.
In which case, you can still pass it in yourself, but nothing bad happens. So
Yeah, if you're looking for something global.
But if you're looking for something global, you can call the first one and say that you want just the safe system.
True, but at that point, basically my argument would be you can still get away with one method. You just always have to pass it yourself, and then it always works. You never have to think about it. Like guidelines-wise, like is there perfect if you do it unnecessarily? I don't think so.
Oh, this whole function, like I don't care about perf for any of these functions.
Okay, so then, like in the interest of like just having one way of doing it and like not having like people, because as soon as you offer the first one, most people will call the first one.
Yeah, I would probably always call the first one.
Yeah, but
Without
the
reading
documentation, I wouldn't know why I called the second
and
one.
the first one, if you pass 0, it will throw of 0 makes no sense without a caller context. Give me a caller context, you idiot. So.
Okay, so we keep only the second overload. We make all of the parameters mandatory.
Yeah.
And do we accept null assembly as a parameter? Like, can you pass in null? I guess yeah. We would just not look at the assembly load context.
If you pass null or if you say that the import search path spec should be just the system trust path, then you don't care about the caller context.
Okay.
So maybe we say that legacy will throw if caller is null because it turns out we cannot match that behavior.
Yeah.
So
That works for me.
So
then we get rid of
this one. Yeah, I just did. First part of it. Okay. The second part, yeah.
That works for me.
And then this one we said it's try delegate as well.
Yeah, those keep try that.
Try get
delegate.
Sorry, yeah.
This is delegate the noun, not delegate the verb.
What is it? This one. I hate it.
You're the one that wanted to have out parameters after the part.
Yeah, and except the out parameter has to come before the exact spelling.
Yeah. So the only option that I think is not sensible
Is that true that the optional parameters always have to be last?
Yes.
Yes.
C# language requirement.
So you would prefer overloads rather than moving the optional parameters?
Well, if you want, because I think that's just ugly. I don't know.
I
Aesthetic-wise, I think I'll go for that.
One's just going to call the other, so whatever.
Yeah. And in this case, I kind of agree. We really want the default, and we really want most people to call it this one. So, like, it seems like doing an overload here is kind of like
the default that false is the appropriate behavior.
Yep. And then
Okay. There was one more change then.
You want to call that exact name, right?
now we named it symbol name, so it didn't look like name anymore.
Okay. So the only other change was removing the unload method entirely.
And that's just a point in time until we figure out.
Until we figure out how to do it. It turns out it's way too difficult to do it reliably. For example, if we go through the assembly load context, well, the assembly load context has a load method that gives back an int pointer, it doesn't have an unload method. So we don't know where they got the int pointer from, so we can't call free library, and we can't call DL free. We could end up crashing the system. Another thing is, if you call try get delegate, and you get back and one of the delegates that you pass in involves safe handles, when is it ever free, or when is it ever safe to free that safe handle if the library could have been unloaded, and safe handles destructor calls in the library? We have random stuff like that.
So wasn't Jan the one who felt strongly that we should have an unload API?
Yeah, but he was also arguing that basically every type that you should use through any of these delegates are limitable, and no one should ever use in safe handles. I can't accept that.
He did in email say that if arguing about unload will stop the API from shipping, he will stop arguing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we can probably figure out a more sane way to do this in the future.
Right.
But I don't think, given our time constraints, I don't think we can get it in time.
Yeah, I think the design principle that Jan has, as Christos suggested, is he prefers a world that is clear cut into an API is either safe or it's unsafe. Yeah. And we don't try to make things that are inherently unsafe safer, but we can't go all the way to make it safe.
This API is safe as long as you're not passing us crazy documents.
To expand on Levi's point of not being able to unload, if we want to be able to match the DLL import behavior of using the call, you pass in an assembly and say, do the normal thing. Right. That is a scenario that people probably care about, and that is a thing that there is no defined unload. So either unload would throw or unload would crash the system.
Well, in practice, what would happen is we would defer it until after main shutdown, just like DLL import does. But if you defer it until after main shutdown, what's the point of having an unload now? Yeah.
So it would need more work before we could figure out what an unload could even look like.
Yeah, I don't know.
But we can add it in the future, and we can call it unload because we now have try load.
Yeah, we can always add it unload as a so we can always add it later as
I think if we were to do it properly, I think it would also require changes to assembly load context, and I don't think that's a rabbit hole we want to go down before too long. But we'll leave open the ability to do it for 2.
Right. Does that seem right to everybody?
There were some questions that were posted just now. I don't think that's something that would affect the API shape.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't you specify it relative to the...
Yeah, isn't name allowed to be a relative identifier?
Name is allowed to be relative, yes.
Yeah.
Because we'll just do path.
Yeah, so if you did .. /bin/ whatever, relative or with your context as a caller, so. We'll probably to test convoluted scenarios like this.
If I pass in myself, in the normal scenario where I'm loaded from the NuGet cache, that assembly would be having a location somewhere in the cache. So if I now say load, try load, and I pass in as name, I don't know, .. native /x86 foo.dll, like you want that, right?
Yeah. So the other comment was...
It's the same thing DLL import would do, whatever that is.
But my point is it's relative to the location of this guy, right? It's not relative to the location of the working directory.
It depends on what you pass for DLL import search paths.
And that's why a few weeks ago, Jeremy was passionately arguing that we can't really have a default.
Yeah, which I still agree with, because all you're doing with that is you're just saying somebody would be some value, that may not be the right one either.
Yeah, but then that's their bug and not ours. The number one thing with security bugs is make it someone else's problem.
Well, the thing is, we
True, but if you care about the overall reliability, I think that line of reasoning doesn't result in fewer bugs.
we can at least detect if somebody's passing us either ambiguous or weird combinations of parameters,
Right.
and return an appropriate error message, maybe even included an FW link as to how to properly use the API. Which we've done, when I was on ASP.NET, we did that before.
I mean, we do the same thing. Except
Yeah, so we'll just, Levi, assuming that you're the one implementing it, it means that you have the burden of testing this complicated nightmare of stuff. Does it really work if you're in a NuGet thing, and do relative paths work if you're loaded from a NuGet thing? And, just saying. Hey, you don't want the burden of test? Convince the vice presidents that we need to test division back.
No, I just want to get the API in under the deadline, and if there are bugs, like at least we have more time to address them.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be paralyzed to inaction.
Yeah. But so it'll be things like in test we need to understand if relative paths work, if we do / normalization, if we do, like, we'll just want to have tests that codify what our behavior is, so we don't get blindsided by customers saying, hey, why did this stop working yesterday? And we're like, I didn't know it worked yesterday.
For an API that was just introduced, wow.
Yeah. In the future.
Yeah.
Is this can be used in new WP apps?
It's new API, so that core.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about to have like some weird concern about loading DLL from somewhere that is not allowed to load from.
I mean, for right now, it'll be a netcore only API, so no.
Right.
In the future,
Could you have called load library, get proc address, free library from WPS in the first place? It should work theoretically.
It's not expose load library from there. You cannot call load library at all. But right now, if you have API like this, so we are saying that
it's other thing.
Yes,
right?
it's-
so we
load whatever
Right.
app package library or something.
there's a question. I mean, do DLL imports work in UWP? If so, then this is just an unloaded or an unrolled DLL import.
Well,
Yeah, but DLL import doesn't do that. But DLL import goes for one time, and I think in UWP you basically only allow
It's
the
loaded
system
differently.
ones or the ones from the AppX package.
Yeah, I wouldn't go through those code paths anyway.
So, I mean, we can figure this out once we port the API to UWP.
Yeah, they actually have to support it.
You wanted the API? Okay.
I want the API to be usable. I don't want to be the one to implement it.
I see.
I just want to call this function.
I have an interest as a customer, not as a user. What's wrong with you? Alright, so then I think the crystal one we should do later. So does anybody have context on this one yet?
This is reflection metadata.
This is just adding the ability to omit that record.
Well, it's mostly going to read it.
Oof.
Oh, we have actually writer APIs?
I mean, the writer is what came first, so.
Yeah, Rosalind uses it to build,
No, reader.
produces the PDBs.
reader was there for reading references.
Oh, because it's on PE reader.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, but the API starts with for some reason debug directory builder.
Yeah, good shit, the builder. Amazing.
Yeah.
I completely lost track of that. I was thinking only in reader. But it's cool.
It's part of the portable symbols.
Yeah.
Can you scroll down? Is this all we've got?
I believe that's all we got.
So there isn't.
Is the PE does he say if the PE checksum is defined to be a particular algorithm, or if it's supposed to carry an algorithm identifier?
Well, he says there's
Algorithm
a
name.
There's an algorithm name.
Oh, I see. The add checksum entry takes the name and the checksum. Okay. I saw the one that just took the immutable array, and is it taking immutable array?
Is name the right thing? Like, isn't that this other thing that you talked about last time? The
OID.
OID.
OIDs are used when serializing cryptographic structures. Humans tend to use names.
So this is just like SHA-1 and like that. Like is that? Okay, yeah.
None of this stuff has an official spec, if I recall, for PE.
So there's a link to see specification for details.
That's supportive of PDB specification, I think.
It's
Yeah, so while I agree that when you add the checksum entry, it is immutable array the right type there, or should it just be array and make a defensive copy?
Do they use
Most of the APIs, this whole set of APIs is using immutable.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the builder though. The builder is mutable, right? So like you wouldn't necessarily build immutable.
It just stood out.
But quite frankly, it probably doesn't matter because, I don't know. I read only list of bytes seems weird, but that's probably the best you can do.
Or you just take a byte array.
Array of bytes, yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is if you have a byte array, it's great. If you don't have a byte array, then it's shitty because then you need to copy. Right?
It's a hash. It's
A mutable array is going to have the same problem. Like it's going to copy it.
No, it depends on what instance you have. But if you already have an immutable array, then you just pass it in. If you don't, then otherwise there was the end of
Yeah, no matter what, if you have anything other than an immutable array, you're making a copy.
Exactly. Same with making an array. Because if you have an immutable array, you don't get the underlying array easily.
So the algorithm name is literally just SHA-26345.
Okay, so that makes
So
sense.
literally just 6 characters. Okay.
Or 4. Theoretically.
SHA-1's not supported.
Oh, okay. Oh, because that already had an existing record, I think.
Why they are not using read-only spans?
Because of existing APIs, right? This is asymmetric.
This needs to go back further. Roslyn uses this on old versions of desktop, where we don't want them using slow span.
Well, I think span though is going back.
It is, but we're not. We haven't taken the dependency.
Rosalind is
at
not
all.
taking the dependency on span areas either. So this is.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You don't want to introduce a dependency. That's a different thing. Yes.
Oh, this is a new part of the PDB. It's not an existing record.
Well, I don't think it's even in the. I think it's only in part of PDBs, right? I don't think it's in the legacy PDB. Because I think the PDBs were designed like modifying things were not part of that model that they cared about. But I might be wrong with that.
Wait.
But API-wise, it seems fine.
What is the T data in add entry? Is that just a pattern we use in Spark?
I believe that's the existing API, where they just add new arguments to that. Let me check, but
So they're doing this to protect people from hacking PDBs.
Yeah. Well, it looks like from this issue that add entry is a new API.
Yeah, I think it's new entirely.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if this matches their existing conventions.
There's nothing on Debug Directory or hardly anything on there today. It's got
I'm not seeing
add
anything
code view entry.
in here that deals with immutable arrays.
On debug builder.
No, like on anything in this namespace.
Yeah, not in part of executable probably. But in the rest of the module, everything is immutable.
Okay.
I mean, except for
I guess I'm also not seeing anything with these mutable arrays. So. Arrays seem to be a new concept.
Okay.
Well, there's definitely a dependence between reflection metadata and immutable collections.
So byte array. Right.
And they don't even.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any immutable. Oh, here we go. They return. They've got system reflection metadata array shape that deals in immutable arrays. To immutable array. Right, bytes immutable array. Other places I see overloads that take both byte array and immutable array byte in the same assembly. Yeah, I see a couple instances of that. Actually, yeah. Every place in this API where they do take. Here's one exception: custom attribute value only takes an immutable array, but seems to me like for usability they could easily add an overload.
Yeah, although like looking at this API, this is not.
This whole thing is
Not designed for usability.
I mean, certainly the answer would be like, okay, yes, they can write the thing that says like, make a new immutable array from the array, and they're like, why do we want to have an overload that we have to test, and just make a caller do it.
I honestly think that most of the stuff, I mean, eventually they will probably take a dependency on span to just be able to speed things up, because that's what they really care about. This thing is that it's super low overhead. Right?
Well, I mean, there is a difference between an immutable array of byte and a read-only span of byte. Read-only span is I can't change it. Immutable is, and you also can't change it.
Yeah, but like, it doesn't matter
They don't care.
because they don't stash it away. Right? They,
Yeah.
they just take the data and
Read
put
it.
it immediately away, so like, they don't care about the lifetime overall.
In debug metadata,
From that perspective, they could take an IEnumerable byte.
Yeah, that's going back to the argument for being efficient. Sorry, like there's things is immutable. IEnumerable of byte for read-only byte arrays. Every time I looked at that, I'm like, oh god, like it's pretty bad. It's the most inefficient way to get a bunch of bytes.
That's true.
Especially when it's like 16. You allocate like 10 times.
there is an additional API just off the bottom of the screen after the in addition comment. The only real feedback I had on this is is the offset in bytes always guaranteed to fit within the 32-bit interval? Like, are they referencing data in memory, or are they referencing like a file?
Start of the metadata blob to the start of the scroll right. You scroll right down.
To the start of the ID blob, is what it says.
Is it the existing class only has
So
two
it's-
members? So one of them is immutable byte array.
From
ID.
one part of the file to another part of the file. So it's within.
So it's within a file on disk as opposed to a file that's been loaded into memory?
This thing is building the layout of a file. So
Yeah.
So it doesn't. It's
Oh, okay.
it's the offset, but what they really mean is the distance between two parts of the file. It's not the
Yes.
offset.
But what I was wondering is 32 bits enough to contain that?
And like, what if you have a 16 PE file?
PE file that's over.
Have you seen the PE, like the PDBs for like kernel 32-bit?
I think we actually have a limitation
Okay.
in the core CLR, or actually in the CLR too. I remember having discussions around crazy Fortran compilers produce.
Because
So unlikely to be a problem.
like the ultimate scale of inline AOT is it's as big as it needs to be, right? So that could easily exceed 4 gig. You've got other problems when your AOT thing exceeds 4 gig, but
I think there's already plenty of places where they're using ints in this for double check here.
But file sizes, all our APIs are already longs.
Right.
Like
this,
if you
this might also be a field within the file.
Distances between parts of the file, and like those might be close together. But yeah, I mean, you have good feedback, but I think it's probably not the only instance of this. Let's see.
Well, I didn't see anything else on the debug metadata header type that concerned me in that regard. The fact that it's called header makes me think that it's actually in the file as a 4-byte value, which means that they're hard-coded anyway to be 32 bits, which is fine.
next we'll get portable PDB 64.
Yay!
Use uint for other offsets.
So not a concern then, sounds like.
For add entry, I mean, like, does it take any type? I mean, it's not restricted to any specific types or any interface.
So which one, the generic?
Add entry, yeah. Because like, if
I think most of the time when they have these things, it's struct, so there's no way to
Scroll right. They put a constraint on it.
no, there is no constraint.
And that's what they did in other areas at least, because the thing is they don't really have a class hierarchy, right? Everything they do is structs, and then there's some conventions that they mirror a class hierarchy by just making structs implicitly removed on their structs. So most of their blobs, I believe, they even have blobs. Do they have blobs as a representation at all?
They restricted to structs, as you're saying, or to some interface they introduced. To
It
make sure
is a
that
weird API. I mean, because basically the way I understand the API is you pass it any type you want, and then the only thing you have to do is you have to provide essentially the serializer yourself. And so like there's no, I mean, I don't think the API does much for you. You might as well just like had the other one that just takes a blob builder, right? Right, like I don't know, like it seems no.
Where do you pass in the actual object? Oh, there it is. Data.
Data. That's where you pass it in, and then that's where you pass in your delegate, right? So. And the only problem is probably they cannot. Probably you can't construct the blob builder yourself easily or something. Probably that's why they have to give it back to you. I mean, I don't know, considering that this API is not really meant for like the average Joe. Yeah, I mean, unless you write a compiler, I mean, that's like 5 people in the world.
So
All of them are very happy with it.
both Nick and Tomas signed off.
Yeah, Tomas proposed it, and then Nick, I think, said it was good to go.
Yeah, like that's something that they should do.
I'm going to write a sample. Every time I try and use any part of that API, I have to go in code that's already.
But there's a sample. It's like
It's called Rosin. It's like find a lot of code that uses that API. In fact, they shipped this, their demo. What was the other one? I said. Oh God, I don't know what attention now. Welcome back. Were you on the conf call?
Not on this one.
No, the one with the customer about pooling?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll talk to you about that. Alright, so then let's look at Christoph's baby here.
Right, so I don't know if you guys remember, but last week I brought it up. I basically was using some of our APIs in kind of async heavy code, and I realized that we don't have enough methods to deal with memory of T. So I proposed that we add one method, and then the discussion started, and people said, well, we are inconsistent in general. So I modified the proposal, and it doesn't have specific APIs. If you scroll down, it's basically a set of guidelines that say this is what you should be doing if you have types that can be cast to what I call slice types. So at the beginning of this proposal, I defined slice types as memory of T, span of T, read-only span of T, and read-only memory of T. So if you have a type that can support conversions from itself, from the source type to a slice type, what I propose that we do, and it's guideline number 1, is you provide a method called as whatever the slice type is, and you provide all overloads to immediately allow you to create like a sub-slice. Because today, for example, we have these exact overloads on string, but not on array. So on array, actually, the page that you are on now starts with string. You can just say as read-only span 510, but for array you have to first say as span and then slice. So that's first inconsistency. You're kind of in a flow of coding, and you cannot learn a single pattern to get a slice from a type. You have to do it differently depending on what is the source type. So the proposal is the main method for conversions will be as whatever the target type is, the slice type, and it has all overloads.
Hey, Christoph, you may have said it, but what are the set of source types that you're thinking about here?
Yes, so I think if I have it here, I think the most important source types for us are array, string, and array segment.
Would array segment take start and length, or would it just be the array segment itself as the only parameter?
I know that it may be seen as redundant, but I think it's very important that there's like consistency. Wherever you have you go from a source type to a span type, you can say as span, and you have those 3 overloads. I think there's value in it, despite the fact that maybe for array segment is less important, but it doesn't hurt.
Let's say you already.
Well, for array segment, it wouldn't be replacing the values in the array segment. It would still do the math to offset and subset the array segment based on the start and length you pass, right?
Slice it once, correct?
Well, it would honor the constraints of the segment. In addition, would add additional constraint for those 2 inputs.
Right.
That's it.
Right. That's what I meant. So it's not like, I'm not sure if it's really redundant.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it's doing the math for you.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing you have to be careful of is that you don't want people to feel like they have to pass segment.offset, segment.count for these parameters, because that would obviously do the wrong thing. I don't know if anyone would do that in practice.
Yeah.
I would hope not.
Mm-hmm.
So if you already had range, would we still add the in-base overloads?
So for context for other people, so we are working with the language team on a type called range that will be used in some slicing syntax, like language slicing syntax. Unfortunately, I think we are kind of not ready yet with the range type. And I'll tell you what I worry the most about. I worry about the performance. So slicing an array using, I pass in the array and 2 ints is very lightweight. Doing the same thing with range adds overhead. So I think once we design range, we will have to measure what the overhead is, and it may be not trivial because range supports things like being open-ended on one side. So like even if you just want to slice off the front, well, range will still be 2 ints. So, well, it will be more expensive than the one that, just takes the as method that takes one int. So I think, unfortunately, we are not aligned with the schedules for these two things.
Right.
And we will have to get range and then measure.
Yeah, the only feeling that I have is like it looks like, Jesus, I was expecting Steven to drop off, but apparently that didn't happen. It's like basically every single type adds 3 overloads, right? Every single conversion you have. So it's like, number of types you support times, 4 eventually with the range type.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a lot of methods, right? It's like 12.
But the good thing is they are overloads. So I'm a bit more concerned and sympathetic. Some people raise the issue that I'm proposing here in point number 2, that we add conversions both to span and memory. I'm a bit more sympathetic that it adds more APIs. Overloads, to me, they have such a low incremental, overhead that...
Yeah, I'm just thinking from the point of view, it's like, it's great having conventions, but let's say we had a new type that we want to spanify. Like, I mean, the more things we ask you to add, like, it's still code somebody needs to write, right? It's like, well, like, how easy is it to keep the conventions up if somebody just says, oh, fuck it, I only add the, second overload because I never needed length or something, right? Like, that's...
So one thing that we could consider for, like, future types is don't make it like you have to do it. It could be, well, if you think that you don't care about the overhead of range, just add basically the one that converts from source type to slice and the one that converts from source, slice, and range to type. It could be an option. I think for string and array, they are such a core types, and the performance here is, in a lot of scenarios, very important. I would just take the hit.
In fact, you get away with just the range one, right? Because you can just say that it's default to the open-ended version of it, and it's just everything.
Yeah, correct.
So you really don't care about
exactly.
Which is actually nice. And then we can say, yep, just add more overloads as you measure and like care.
For things like string, I don't think you mentioned this earlier, but would their methods be called as span or as read?
Yeah, so this is today one additional thing that I think is very annoying. There are some types that, like the source type is already, read-only or immutable. It's kind of implied that the result of slicing will be read-only or immutable. Therefore, I think the fact that we today ask you to, do the read-only and it just makes the lines of code longer, I think it's completely redundant. I don't think it adds value.
Sure.
Now, some people had a different opinion in the past. I'm just saying my opinion is I don't think it adds value. I wish the string method was just as span and it returns read-only span. So
basically you're saying we should be consistent in the naming of those methods, right? Regardless of whether the type only offers one version of it.
And in addition, this guideline says when you have a read-write type, like array, don't provide as read-only span.
Because it's an implicit conversion.
Because it's an implicit conversion later. So if you're passing it to somebody, yes, it will convert to read-only span if the method takes read-only span. But you inside your method, like what? You're gonna be protecting yourself from yourself from yourself by casting to read-only. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I can imagine some people who want to do it and they will have an option, but I don't think it's super common.
And for Rule 5, where it says limit constructors to the longest overload, constructors of span and memory?
Correct. So I had it as an optional, not sure if we want that, we should discuss. So, I think it was either Jan or Steve or both kind of commented, we have so many different ways of, conversions. I kind of don't mind because I think in general, for me, these methods are the most important ones. They are very usable. They do a generic type parameter inference, and they should be the default way people convert source types to slice types. In addition, we have constructors, and Jan and Steve commented, well, should we have them? And especially that some of the constructors, we have all the overloads. I think it's not a big deal that we have them, but if we want to remove, I would just leave the constructor as the longest one. Takes an array and 2 ints.
Would that potentially cause performance hits? Because now you're doing additional checks which could have been elided if you were just passing the whole array. Because now you need to check our offset in length.
Possibly. Could be.
But we will still have the option to use as.
Yeah.
But those would call private.
That's why I said we should discuss, because I don't know what, whether there's value in removing those, but if people say like, no, we have too many things, then we should consider removing, the shortest. Oh, can I have one?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say, Christoph, stop.
And can I use this napkin?
You can.
It was not used before, correct? It doesn't look super used, at least.
Used like new.
What we lose if we remove the constructors? All constructors.
All constructors?
Yes.
Then we lose the ability to construct the type.
No, you have you already have as whatever, right?
Well, this as method just calls the constructor.
There's a possibility people might wrap these types for some ungodly reason, for little helpers and stuff that you wouldn't have constructed, you couldn't do.
Well, what constructors were you thinking of removing?
No, I mean, like, if you have arrays today, so it looks like our recommendation is to use as, like, at whatever, as span, as memory, to do whatever the operation to convert it to span, right? So I'm seeing that it's better than using the constructor at the time.
Oh, so use the factory instead of the constructor.
Right. So, and this will make, like, we have just one way to construct the span.
So let's talk about the wrapping case. I don't think there's a problem. You cannot inherit from these types. So you don't need to call the base constructor.
And the structs.
I think, having said that, we need these constructors.
Do we seal memory?
To construct the types. We could make them internal. Is that what you're saying?
Can be internal, yeah.
Memory is the only class we have.
Maybe, though it's not even clear whether we can do that.
What type are these as methods on?
They're extensions on
Yeah, extension.
Memory extensions
What
on any
namespace is that?
system.
System. Memory extensions.
Straight up system. So we're now adding extension methods that are always going to be visible on system string.
Correct.
Right.
Come, so you want people to use the feature.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
I mean, considering that we already have like 500 link methods to show up on the string, what's a few more span API? Honestly, like, factories are nice if you want to name the constructor, essentially. Otherwise, they don't add much. Unless you have a class hierarchy, you would just, hide the method and differentiate. But in our case, given that we always give you back the struct, the only value that factories have over constructors is that you can, take the same argument type with different, roles, if you will.
No, the main advantage for these is that you can infer the type parameter. It's really annoying when you construct a span, you have to say what the type of the T is.
That's the other thing, yeah. They really need to fix that.
Which means it can't be used for anonymous types as well. Because you have no decal type.
Though I'm not sure if you can convert anonymous types to spans.
Array some anonymous types.
Arrays are anonymous types. I'm not sure. T bracket bracket is their name. Correct?
Anonymous types have an actual representation in the IL. They're real honest file types.
There's no such thing as anonymous types in the CLR, right? They call them display classes in C# because that's what they just generate a name that's ugly that you can't utter in C#. That's it. But they're anonymous types. But what do you mean? Like they don't work with these features?
You you can't, if you have a constructor, you can't provide the correct T for an anonymous type. But if you have a static method factory like this, you can.
Oh, yes, correct, yes. That's one of the reasons why, yeah, they care.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, because
I don't know if that's a big use case for this.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Given that this feature is all about minimizing allocations, like going to anonymous types seems like the opposite way of what you want to go.
Well, I mean,
But yeah.
Do we see people taking regular arrays of reference types and then just slicing them, just to have a simple slicing mechanism, and thus having span of by class, span of person? Like, is that a common use case?
I don't think so. I think the overlap of these two kinds of people, the people that have arrays of anonymous types, I think are the people that really like
Ignore anonymous types.
like
Just
that,
like
that's just not.
like a person array. Like, would people be satisfied with array segment for those cases?
Well, so the thing is, array segment was not a very usable type until like very recently, when we actually made it implement some collection interfaces.
Yeah.
Because beforehand, you would have just basically have to pass this thing around. The problem now is like, well, every time you pass it around, you box it, and it's like the type is still not very super useful. Like,
Well, now we made it very usable because you can cast it to a span, and then we have a bunch of span APIs that you can use.
yeah, except that. Yeah, maybe. I mean. It's hard to say. Like, it's a new feature, so it's hard to predict like what kind of people will use it a lot, right? Like that's. I honestly think that, like, just based on gut feel, like when we add the range type and we add range-based indexers to common types like arrays and strings and others, whatever those guys return will be the most commonly used ones. And so the decision we are making what this thing will return is probably more impactful than whether people will be commonly slicing their person arrays with that method. Because I don't think that's. Yeah.
So implicit cast. So additional way to convert is implicit cast that we have. I also kind of think that first implicit casts don't provide a lot of kind of learning overhead for developers because they are like non-visible. If you don't know, you don't care. If you know, then it just works for you. Explicit casts are a bit more problematic because they can throw and you have to know what you're doing, but implicit casts are kind of like not impactful. So I said, like, if implicit casts make sense, they should be there. So for example, from array to span, it makes sense, and it, should be there. So you can just assign a span variable from an array.
This makes sense.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. As I said, like the only concern I had was the number of methods, but I think that's largely a non-concern. No.
Steve, any comments?
I mean, my main concern was around consistency, and your proposal provides that. I still don't love having 17 ways to do the same thing, but I can get over it.
So what do people think about the 3 items at the end of my guidelines? Like which 5, 6, and 7, which ones do we do and which ones we don't?
I think limiting the constructors is reasonable.
And the goal there, Christoph, is basically to encourage people to use the as methods rather than the constructors.
It kind of communicates this is the way to do it, not, oh, you have those all options in as methods and all options in constructors. Well, now you pick which one is better. I think if we have only the longest constructor, people will think, well, this is just like plumbing for infrastructure because somehow they have to support the as methods. Now, Levi brought up the point of, maybe it will affect performance. So I think maybe we should just say...
Because we have to do checks on the arguments.
Yeah. I mean, we have lots of like internal and unsafe APIs to create spans without any checks whatsoever.
But those are pretty clearly unsafe, though.
Yeah. Well, but they can be used in the, in the conversion methods as span. So to avoid the checks that you mentioned.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the second one, skipping the... Oh, no. So the sixth one we haven't yet discussed. So basically, the guidelines propose that we don't have as conversion methods, both to read, write, and read only. Because yes, then it would be like, array has as memory, as read-only memory, as span, as read-only span. It just converts to the natural. If you mutable, it converts to mutable slice. If you immutable, it converts to immutable. Well, sometimes people want to now get to the read-only version, and today they will have to do a cast. So one option we have, and we don't have this API today, is add an API called as read-only to both span and memory of T.
It seems like the only cases where I need something like this is either when I'm calling a method that takes the read-only thing, or when I'm storing it into a local that takes the read-only thing. And in either of those cases, the implicit cast applies, and why would I want to type out the extra characters?
Correct. So I was thinking about this. That's why we should start, because I thought first exactly what you said, and secondly we can always add it later if we discover that it's a problem. So I would propose that we skip 6 basically.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then the last one is to skip the read-only from these conversion method names, because we're gonna only have one. Whenever you go to a type, there's gonna be only a as span. So why add the read-only?
Yeah, I mean.
But you're going to still be returning read-only.
Correct. But we have it in the framework all the time. Like we have many APIs that return.
Will we ever need a case where we have to have both as span and as read-only span? Because in some cases you get a span, in some cases you get a read-only span.
But we're not going. So we're not going. That's the guideline says we're never going to have that. We're not going to add as read-only span and as.
We need both potentially as you come out.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You can always pass the span to a read-only span. Right. If you're passing it as a parameter, it will get automatically converted for you as a cast. I mean, we should make sure that, again, that's free in terms of the conversion.
I think it's free enough. It's not free, but
Free enough.
yeah. I mean, today we have an even bigger problem. Just to get into the span world, you have to call one method as span and then slice. Well, we are now trading one small inefficiency for another, such that we end up with not too many methods related to this whole space on like string and array.
So the goal, if you really wanted to get a read-only span of array, you would call as span to get the span, and then call as read-only span from that span.
Well, so what Steve was saying is, and I agree with him, I don't think you ever need to get to a read-only span of array.
You do a lot of cases when you want to call an API. They only takes read-only.
Well, no, but there's a conversion. So basically, inside your method, you just do a span. You do whatever you want, slice it, blah, 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 and then you can just pass it to a method that takes read-only span. The only reason to call as read-only span within your method, where you just cast an array, is to kind of protect the array from yourself. And I'm like, geez, I want to make sure that I don't have bugs in my code and don't mutate the array. But that's such a rare case that I don't believe many people will do it.
And in that case, that would also, you'd be only mutating it in that expression, because otherwise, if you just store it into a local that's typed as read-only, you don't need the as read-only anyway, because there's an implicit conversion that happens storing it into the local.
Yep.
Also, I don't buy this scenario from the pure fact that you already have a reference to the underlying array too. So if you want to protect yourself from that, what are you doing? Are you immediately develop amnesia and forget the array? You have it already in scope. I mean, I don't think that it works very well.
And also, don't write methods that are 10,000 lines of code.
That's probably also true.
No, I'm just thinking.
Are you talking to the people in this room, or?
Come on, man. The last method I wrote was only 5,000 lines. It's good.
Do we have any cases where people would have overloads where they take the span and read-only span as both possibilities? I don't know if there would be any of those scenarios.
I don't know if we have those.
Well, even if they did, you would pick the most specific one, so it's fine.
Yes, but you can choose it. I don't know if there were for some reason you might want to still protect the data when you're passing it through. So you'd have to cast or call as read only.
So there are probably cases, but if we run into this being important, we either add this as read only, or you just cast explicitly.
I'm a little hesitant to say I like the as span thing that's going to return read only spans, just because it feels like I can't really tell what I'm getting back by looking at code. It's always been one of my pitfalls. One of the reasons, like why people don't like var and other things, because you can't quite tell what's going on without knowing the exact APIs that are happening.
Even if you know that the original input's a string.
Yeah, but I may not be memorizing which ones are string or read only.
So the thing is, look how many APIs we have in the framework. Like almost all APIs have this problem. You have APIs, you have methods, and unless if somebody uses var, you don't see what they.
But if you use the same method, in some cases, it's going to have different return types in various places. That's where the same method name is going to have different return types.
Yeah,
That's where I'm at.
So I agree with you. On the other hand, though, like I think we will not be able to keep that up anyway. So because I'm thinking ahead of when we add a range indexer, right? Like it's an indexer, it takes a range, it doesn't have a name, so you can't tell the return type either. So as soon as I index into a span, there's no way for us to name this guy, because it will be bracket and then whatever range syntax we have, and then you get back whatever span is appropriate for that time. Right? And so like you will not be able to tell what the return value of that thing is either. Like in the same way that you have to know that the indexer of string returns a char and not, another string. Like that's another case of that, and that's why I don't know. I was not a fan of var when the C# team announced it, and as I was using it, I realized that I don't care about type names at all. Apparently, like I just care about.
If you're typing code a lot, you don't care about it. No, if you're actually reading code a lot.
I'm reading code a lot.
You care about it a lot.
And I never care about types. I care about the names of my variables much more than I care about the type names.
I care about them. Like I have such trouble doing code reviews when I can't determine the type from the line that's cleared.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I mean, like every time I looked at Herman's code, for example, he was using types everywhere, but his type names were X and Y. Oh, sorry, his variable names were X and Y. I'm like, I would have really preferred you spend the characters on the variable name, but the type name in front of it. So like I don't know. Like I think it's largely a preference, but I think in this case the problem is there's really not a preference here because we will not be able to name all cases like indexers for functions. We kind of have to accept that as an outcome. And I kind of agree with Stephen that it seems redundant to spell read only every single time you want to get a span from the string because, well, that's just the way Spring works. You cannot get it.
Also, I think that I kind of buy the argument about code reviews, where like you literally have no idea what the type that you're getting back is. Here, you're getting a span. It's going to have an indexer and a length and this and that. The only thing that you don't know is potentially whether it's read write or read only. But I mean, later on in the method you see somebody mutating it. Well, then it's a span. Otherwise, it's not. It's not that it's going to affect your code review. That's my point.
C++ actually has the same behavior, which will return either a const or a non-const, and people see that it hasn't really been at all. I'm not holding C++ up as like a design, but
No, I don't have a strong opinion either. I just wanted to. That's my only hesitation for 7 would be that is being able to determine it.
So it seems like we largely agree with the thing as it's proposed, right?
Except for 6.
Yeah, 6 we said. Well, you already said you don't want to do all of them. So wait.
No, just 6.
So we said we want to do this one.
This one we will do, but we will, I will basically talk to. I think Ason said that he will implement it, and I will just tell him don't lose perf.
Yeah.
Correct? Like if you.
We should never call it ourselves.
Kind of, yes.
We'll just provide it for everyone else to never.
Well, and we also should just call it to implement the as methods. After we have the as methods, we should use them.
But the only as methods we would ever implement are the longest ones.
No, all of them.
With that one constructor?
No.
We would have our
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm saying once we have the as methods, our code will be using the as methods.
Oh, yeah. I was talking about the constructor specifically. I was wondering if...
One public constructor, which is the anonymous one. And
that we hope people never use.
Are you like asking, should we just not have the safe constructor, just have the unsafe constructor and then as methods? Is that what you're proposing?
It's just weird that we would introduce an API that A, we're not using internally, and B, we're telling customers not to use anyway. Like, that's just so weird.
This is why I asked about like what we lose if we don't have.
We could. Well, the longest constructor will be equivalent to calling the as methods with 3 ones. And I think there's something...
What we don't want, though, is for people to get in the habit of just calling the constructor, because why wouldn't you use a constructor when you're trying to make a span, right? And then they see only one constructor, they fill everything in, and then they're wondering why they're not getting the performance gains that we're promising people, right?
So I would say either to keep all constructors we have today, or just remove all of them.
Yeah.
But
like
not just keeping the long
constructors, but not like some weird hybrid.
I'm open. It just feels a bit weird to me to have a type without a constructor, but there's something about, like about having a constructor being it's self-documenting, basically.
It's where people look to begin with, right? But that because it's where people look, it's how the majority of people are going to construct themselves.
I mean, we could get rid of all constructors, including the pointer one, and just have a static method for pointer length going into a span. And then you look at the constructors and there are none, and you're forced to look somewhere else for everything.
That makes it unusable.
Yeah.
I also think, I don't know, people are used to the idea that we have conversion methods. I would venture a guess and say the vast majority of strings will not be used by the constructor calls. Whoever calls a constructor on string? Very rarely. Even though we have 15?
But string is special because it's a primitive, though.
Agree, but this is kind of what span will be as well at some point. If you use it a lot, it will feel like an array type. So I don't know.
The only thing is the documentation. If somebody doesn't know about as span, for example, where they are going to look in the documentation. If I want to find how can I convert from string to span?
Yeah, maybe this could just be.
If I look to span documentation, it will not show me this method, right? Because it's a static on the string, not on the.
I don't know, but this goes back to how I generally deal with types in the framework, right? And for conversions, there's only really 2 things: either the new thing accepts the old thing, or the old thing converts to the new thing. And these are the only 2 places you can go. So I would check both. So I don't know, that seems like.
I also think that it's a bit of a bigger problem what you mentioned for random thousands of types that we have in the framework. For the very core types, people just learn because you either don't know about these new types, or you use them so often that, the initial hit of trying to find how to construct them, you have a hit and then you learn and you know.
The only reason I don't like
my logical thinking about, if I want to convert from string to span, I will go and search for the span APIs, and I will not hit the string span.
Well, interestingly, we don't have a constructor on span that takes a string, so you're out of luck anyway. No matter what we do, you have to find the extension method.
Is this something that maybe we would just solve through code analysis? Provide the longest constructor and then just have a rule that flags it and says hey, don't use this.
It's a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. This goes back to the old Xcode days. It's we just fix it in code. Another rule. But I think I don't think a good rule to have to begin with, because it's still valid. So there's a better way of doing it, but there's nothing wrong with doing it this way either, right? I think generally speaking, if people use a feature, they will learn the shortcuts. They will learn, maybe they do it wrong the first 3 times, or not the wrong, but not the best way of doing it the first 3 times. And then they're going to learn. So I think it's much more important that we have consistency between all the types that you can spanify.
Yeah.
And once you learn, there's an as method that I can call. There's different shapes of those. Like at that point, you basically golden, right? And I think that's generally okay, especially because this is not a feature where I really think people will be very likely to just stumble across it anyway. They will hear about span. They will read at least 3 or 4 lines of code somewhere that will show how span works, and those 4 lines of whatever everybody would see in the build announcement or whatever will involve one of those extension methods. So it will be pretty much the first thing everybody will see. So I don't think it's that bad.
Also, the docs can have some samples. I mean, if you go to span, you will have some samples.
And we can also monitor, our partners calling into this too. We have times.
Right. So then
that'll be a problem.
This is what I wrote. You agree with that? To the best of my knowledge, that's what we agreed on. Yeah.
Okay, looks good.
Alright, perfect. Then, let me just mark this guy.
So these are going into memory extensions on, or string array segment and array. Are there any other collection types that we need to hit?
I don't think we support anything else
No.
today. We have 15 minutes left. I don't think we'll get all those things. I don't even know why we have to review them again. Did we already look at this? Seems like we did this a few times. Probably have not. Apparently not.
I swear we looked at these.
We've looked at other file stuff, but I don't know if this is one.
I've looked at this thing.
That does look like here. We didn't do it to our normal review. We actually had a special slot for this one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. This one was a shorter one. Oh yeah, I think he just created separate issues for those things. There was one over review that he prepared. So yeah, I think this was the one. Yeah, that's right. So basically, so we had this new enumeration APIs, right, that basically do the Go allocation stuff. Part of the feature was a way to do recursion in a way that it doesn't blow up when you cannot access directories. And so the side feature of that is to add overloads to the existing, enumeration APIs that we have, to basically just allow enumeration recursively without, blowing up with exceptions. But they still allocate as much as they do today, but those are the ones that we expect most people to use for usability reasons, and then the other ones are really for high performance scenarios. So then the question is, what should the shape be? And he added this FindOptions enum that basically is a flags enum. The current one that we have today in the framework is this search, what's it called, search option, I think, or something like that. It only has 2 members, like all and top directories, I think. As it's unfortunately non-flags based, so there's nothing we can do. So we're using that as not really an option. That's why there's another one. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
Well, it's also like this one has more options. They're not all just flag enum values, correct?
Oh, it's enum, right? So
Really? I thought it's interesting. For some reason, I remember it being
there's another
abstract,
one
where you can control the size of a buffer and some
yes,
other things.
this is existing as well, but this is for the other API service. This is basically enumeration options. This is literally just for controlling the recursive walk.
So it says, as proposed in some other PR, the flags would be blah, blah, blah. So even in the other PR, it was just an enum.
So there's this find option thing, and then there is the
Yeah.
Find data or something.
yeah, I think this has changed.
So
Find
find,
data is the structure that has
but this is the result of
Yeah,
the
that
search.
was, there was an input from No, I think you're right. It was the same struct.
So this is interesting because I thought we had a discussion. So one concern I have with adding more enums is that if we ever want to have like options that cannot be expressed as an enum flags value, then we're gonna be adding yet another type for options. So one of the options in this enum is called use some buffer size.
Use large buffer.
Use large buffer. Imagine that we want to actually control the size of the buffer. Now we need another struct that has a property that is an int, where you can actually set the size of the buffer and so on and so on. So like, I would like to make sure that we won't be adding more of these options in the future.
So you are suggesting to have like a structure instead of enum. But if we need this, we'll end up with 2 types instead, right?
We're still gonna end up with 2, but it's better 2 than 3. That's my
in the future.
My argument. Now, having said that, I mean there's a difference in usability. Like enum values are very easy to use, versus the moment you have a struct, you have to worry about like, is the struct immutable or mutable? If it's immutable, it's kind of like, it's very wacky to actually get an instance out of it with all the options that you want. If it's mutable,
Data that we just add a new type.
Hey, Jeremy, can you hear us?
Properties is going to be this enum, and then we take this new type.
Perfect. You see the screen?
Yep.
Alright, so I think last time we looked at this, didn't you convert the FindOptions enum into a struct? That actually.
Yes.
So is this thing still up to date, or is this basically the other iteration of that?
That was the other iteration. I thought. I guess I only copied it in the other one with the full set. So the updated options is in the other related 258731.
Oh, the extension points one? So
Yeah.
So is this one, so we can close this one basically and saying this is superseded by the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah, then let's do that.
Fine.
Because otherwise it's confusing. I'll look at this again.
Not a problem. So that's the final set is down there. I didn't update the top one.
So that's right.
That is the base.
Superseded by. Right. Given that you're now on the call, maybe we can close on it.
Yep.
So this is the final API shape, right?
Not up there. No, it's down at the bottom. I didn't update the top. I can do that later.
Yeah. Well, as long as we have the final set, it's fine. All right, here we go.
Right there.
So, but this doesn't include the overloads in the general namespace, right? This is just the enumeration feature.
Yeah. Apparently, I didn't copy. I'm sorry.
No worries. So then we can.
It's all the things that take all the overloads in directory and directory info that take the existing file options now take the enumeration option. There's another one that takes enumeration options instead.
Oh, that's the one basically that I see. Okay, so this is a class now. Yes, now I remember. Yes.
Did we ever land on how we initialize one of these things? Like if there was
in set fields.
there was a whole debate about having the default one or something like that.
Well, it was a struct that was confusing. This one you could have a default one, but the problem is you would have to create it every single time because the thing is mutable, right? You don't want to have a static that everybody can mutate. That would be bad. And in which case, I don't care about allocations for those kind of guys, because even if you enumerate millions of directories, no matter how you enumerate it, you can stash this thing in your own privates and like never allocate it again. Right?
So if you construct this without setting any properties, does it actually do something sane? Is what I'll ask, I guess.
We just knew it up. No, I think the idea is that if you knew it up, it would initialize it to defaults.
Yes, I understand that, but I mean, are the defaults going to be something that's usable? Is what I would.
Yes.
Okay.
So so recursing subdirectories, and so if you look at the defaults, recurse subdirectories is false. Ignore inaccessible is false. That's kind of, so like it's all kind of geared to the existing behavior with one minor tweak. And that minor tweak is the match type is simple and not the DOS one. So so that we get consistent behavior if you use the new overloads across cross-platform.
So do we feel good about the ignore inaccessible being false by default? Seems like such a pain that people like discover.
So let's talk about this from the other point of view. So I think we will probably take enumeration option and put it in I/O, correct? Because we want to use it on the existing APIs, Jeremy, right?
Sure.
So now imagine you're calling.
But then match type would have to be there too.
Yes. So
and
now
match
you call
casing.
existing APIs.
Yes.
The existing APIs do not have that behavior.
Correct, same with match type.
So match type, match casing.
These options, the default is already not equivalent to the existing API.
Well, matching casing will be platform default, right? No?
Yeah, match casing is platform default. So that
Match
the only
type
thing
is
that's
simple.
changed is match type.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And given that they've had to opt in by calling this thing, I think it's probably okay to change some of the defaults from what we used to have.
Now
Yeah.
there's
Fine line, but I think it's.
there's a second, so there's an advantage of like, many people don't know that APIs like this can throw, and then they have software that crashes and they have a problem that they need to solve. And the only solution is to change it to false and move on. Now, the disadvantage of changing it to true is that they don't learn. So it's this exception is very visible. It tells you I cannot access, and you search online and you find the solution to change the default. The alternative is like it's silently, you just don't see some files and you like wonder what the heck, I'm enumerating the file system and one file is not being returned to me. Why? So, there are pros and cons, but...
To be fair, though, this is not hitting you for files. This is only hitting you for directories that you don't have repermissions, right? So I would say on most machines, it's not something you will likely care about.
Oh, really? So it doesn't affect files accessibility?
No, you can always see a file if you can list the directory.
Yeah, it depends on what you're getting, right? So it varies because in the Unix, if you're hitting, the properties are given back as a bag, right? In Windows. In Unix, you only get the file name and the. I don't know if you can stat a file if you don't have rights to it. I'm not sure.
Well, what would LS has to print something, right?
Does LS give you creation time and things like that for things you don't have access to?
I believe so.
Okay, so I just haven't tried that. I just wanted to call that out.
I think things like creation time and file name I think is not considered private. It's just the
so statting is possible because we have a lot of error code in there for throwing, but that may just be for other cases.
But I think regardless, I don't know, generally speaking, the things you don't have read permissions to on a system is not very likely a file that you really want to see, I would say, because I don't know, probably what most people use it for is the context of user data, your own stuff, the things you have written, and you would have to go out of your way to echo the shit away from you. So I don't know, and the people that write that admin software that does backups is you better read the options and choose same verdicts anyway. I think I agree with Wes that given that they have to call a new overload, they're opting into the new feature, and that seems it's okay if that has different defaults. It's also different types, so it's kind of visible that it may behave differently, so it's not a lot of guessing.
So the general rule of thumb I was trying to come up with or go by was that if it made behavior consistent, more consistent than the old ones, then that was definitely something to do. So making it the actual matching be consistent and predictable made a lot of sense because that still doesn't.
Well, the question is, is the existing behavior the one that people expect to have, right? And I think the inaccessible is one of those examples that, as Christoph said, many people don't know that they have a time bomb in their code right now, right? It just happened.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I mean, predictability to me is also like not whether it's consistent with the past, but it's also something people would actually expect. And I would say probably not. So in that sense, we should probably, I don't know how we would phrase it, throw in inaccessible? Oh, that would be, yeah, I guess that's the way to put it. And have it false. What about the other ones? Attributes to skip. You probably say you skip nothing, right? You return system files, I believe, right?
Yep. So that's usually something people don't want, really.
Yeah. Should probably
People don't want the system files. But that one's hard because we'd have to come up with some way of initializing this thing.
Well, I mean, like, I don't think it has to be 0, right? I mean, you could just say if you knew up the enumeration option, just set it to that value. Like, it's no longer a struct.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry. Yeah, because it's a class.
So we can just do it whatever way we feel like.
So we could actually leave it ignore inaccessible and flip it, but
actually, that's a good point. I would be fine with that too. Because the other thing would be
the only flip part to this is that, like, although I guess, so I'm thinking about like the advanced users that would be really particularly interested in this to begin with. The fact that the behavior would change a little bit, they're already kind of looking at the details anyway.
Well, I mean, like, if you expose...
Because if you understand how the existing stuff works, and then like the new stuff works differently, then that's a jump too. But I don't know that that's worse. I think that's probably...
But that one I don't care about. I care more about the existing customers that call the new overloads from the existing types, the new enumeration options to system. I don't care about the people that use the enumeration feature directly, because I expect those to do some sort of reading anyway, because these types will not be, I don't know, like, I don't think you can look at the types and immediately figure out how they're used without spending at least an hour in IntelliSense. So I think that's okay. If they because you have to test it anyway, and then we'll find out.
Yeah, whatever we pick here, we probably can't change either, really.
That's true. We have to live with the defaults probably for a long time. But I mean, like, even the people that care about the performance, like MS Build, how many of them care about system files? Or care about the accessible folders, right?
Almost nobody does, right? I mean, it's like...
So...
It would make people happy. There's a learning curve no matter which way you go, so I guess that's, like, it's better to, like, not abuse people for the sake of consistency. Right, with the existing APIs.
So the only thing I don't have a good handle on is match time. Like, I still don't quite get the difference between DOS and simple.
You need I have extensive write-up on it, but basically simple is star and question mark mean just that. There's no magic. If you ask for star dot star, you're going to get something with a period in it.
I see.
So, and like if you ask for, foo dot star, you won't get foo and foo dot.
I see.
Like, you'll get foo dot. So there's a lot of wacky rules that are meant to like match the 8.3 matching from DOS.
So you're thinking that if the default is simple, that's generally also goodness because it's kind of what people that do wildcards actually expect to happen?
Yes, that's what people actually expect. If you really know how the DOS stuff works, then you get it. But if you're, particularly if you're a Unix person too, it's very frustrating to like have you do your stuff cross-platform. It's going to match different files right now. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I guess the only thing you just mentioned that would probably surprise me is if star doesn't find everything, but
I think
like it kind of makes.
But you have to go into this one, and I think that won't take long for people to learn it.
Yeah,
I think.
I want to break them out of that habit anyway, because star is the same thing, right?
Doesn't like star.txt give you things that are like .text file too? Like it'll trim to the DOS matching will trim the extension to 3 characters.
So that's something I changed. So it's just implicit by this, we no longer match 8.3 file names.
Yeah. So that
which is also, so like the canonical case there is that they've always used for examples, which is meant for the 16-bit compatibility, is that like if your 16-bit program asks for star.htm, it's going to get star.html files as well because of 8.3 file name generation.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things that trips people up like crazy because 8.3 stuff is only turned on by default for the boot drive now, and it's one of those like time bombs that you're talking about that people will eventually run into, is that they're generating random file names and then they actually generate one or generating a whole slew of file names and they just happen to generate one that generates an 8.3 that matches, and what the hell, why did I get this other result back? Oh, it's this hidden 8.3 file name that I don't see normally unless I blah blah blah. So. So we want to put system in the list by default, right?
To skip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hidden.
Flip inaccessible.
Are we okay with leaving the option is here and just defaulting it to true, or do we want to change it so that it's false?
Verbiage is awkward. I don't know how you would say that because we don't.
This is the clearest verbiage that I can come up with, and I think it's clear that's the. Sounds good. Yeah.
Technically, you don't always throw it to. I mean, if you override, you get to decide, but that's kind of nitpicking.
So we should move enumeration options into System.io, but that would mean moving match type and match casing as well.
That's what I just wrote up. Yeah.
Oh, so all three of them. All right, sorry, I read that wrong.
Yeah. Ignore. Yes.
System and hidden. Is that, do we agree? Oh, so.
And then, what's the other one? The one you just mentioned is the
attributes to skip.
Attributes to skip. Should be. Oh yeah.
File attributes dot system.
Should include system files. What about hidden files? Hidden as well?
It's a separate. What do you think?
System is an easy call. Hidden is a little harder.
We could call into the shell and find out what the setting is in there. Browse. But no, with that we don't want that call.
So what's on Unix? They don't have a hidden attribute, right? It's just convention if it starts with a dot, right?
So it starts with a dot, so we consider that hidden. Now that when you do an enumeration, like if you do a directory, you don't see the hidden stuff. So
yeah,
we could start.
Confusing if you're, because I think people do have dot files.
Normally, people don't want the hidden files. I mean, really.
What's the behavior of dir? Does it honor the shell setting?
Huh?
Does dir honor the shell setting, or does it have
the shell setting? No, I don't think so.
Dir hides by default.
I have hidden turned on, and I don't see them.
Yeah, by default, you need to use the trip command to see them.
Dir a
H, yeah.
Dir allows plus and minus on A, right?
Well, it's just it's not plus or minus. It's that you're just looking at stuff, so it's /AH, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever else HS or something.
I meant they have add and subtract semantics.
Not for dir, for a trib, yes. Dir doesn't change anything; it just shows you. It's just like that tells you whether you want to filter them out or not.
Yeah.
So they're filtered out by default. If you want to see hidden stuff, you have to use the AH. It's not +H. I don't think. Let me double check.
You can, but I meant you can do, they have their own default. You can add flags to their default or subtract flags from their default.
I don't think it gives you that sort of flexibility. Looking.
It does.
Yeah, it does have not. You're right. Sorry.
So,
It's not plus in this case. It's just.
but that's because
They have defaults.
they have to. I mean, we provide the. I guess we could provide the same by giving a default and then letting you change that default. It's
Yeah, you
same.
can change the default. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So matching what you get at the command prompt is probably what people expect anyway. So.
Yeah, I think so.
That's actually a good point as a principle. So then we should include hidden files by default.
It doesn't.
Huh?
We said it doesn't include.
No, you did both in Unix and in DOS. You don't see hidden files
That means so the attributes to skip
without opting in.
because they're both filtered.
I see what you mean. Too many inversions. Yes, we should skip both hidden and system files by default.
Good. Okay, Jeremy, I will mark this as needs work because you should still update the proposal for the other overloads, which we should still look at, and then I think we're good to go. All right?
Okay.
And then let's call it a day for today. All right. Thanks, guys, online.